What is up, everybody? Gary Simon here, and let me just ask you a question. Let's take a look at this design right here. Do you think you can implement this design with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Well, chances are most of you probably wouldn't be able to do that because it requires a good understanding of JavaScript. Fortunately, if you want to deal with this in a no-to-low-code way, we have tools like Framer. So Framer allows you to build something like this from scratch without having to touch any code. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today, how exactly to make this particular little interaction animation within Framer. And this is a lesson video that I just finished from my upcoming course From Figma to Framer, which you can take right now, even though I'm still developing it, and you can take it for a massive discount. So definitely check out the top link here in the YouTube description or wherever you're watching this. So let's get started.
Welcome to this brand new lesson where we're gonna do this. All right, looks pretty boring, doesn't it? But it's just kind of like an interesting little section that you might find on a hero, not a hero section, but a landing page, maybe for somebody who has social media accounts, right? Or a business. And instead of just, them scrolling down and getting to this point without any interactions or animations, we're going to make this highly interactive and animated to make it really fun. And in order to do this stuff through code, you would have to understand JavaScript, you'd have to understand CSS, HTML, you'd have to understand a lot in order to pull it off, like what we're about to do. So this is going to be the most involved project so far to this point in this course, but it's so fun. It is so fun, and I haven't used Framer for an extremely long time, but in discovering these abilities that would otherwise take you a long time to code, it is so exciting because you can now just be a designer and not just design stuff in Figma and then hand it off to a developer. You can now do this stuff all yourself, all the way from the design conception in Figma to the fully realized product in the browser and on devices yourself. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just say we want to have a rough idea of how we want this to animate, right? Not everything needs to have animation, but for some, let's just say, for instance, for a fun way to present this UI right here, when a person scrolls down, we're going to assume that this is at the bottom or a middle portion of a landing page. Then we'll have, let's say this will come from nowhere and kind of just fall into place like a little spring animation. And these will do the same thing as well, these other four, but there'll be a stagger on them. And then additionally, maybe this will be slowly rotating in the background. And additionally, we'll add a custom cursor hover effect on this where it will display and animate the person's, I guess you could say, their handle on each respective platform. So we've got our work cut out for us, but you're going to be so excited if you never dealt with this before because it just opens up a world of possibilities without having to know all of that code and what it would take to create it. So let's go ahead, and the first thing we're going to do is just grab the fill. I have a new document open here, and I'm going to close this one out. And we are going to specify that color code here in the browser, and then we'll give this a layout. And initially, I'm just going to put a frame at the top, kind of like pretty large, like 730 or so pixels. I'm going to get rid of the fill. I'm going to take the type tool and just type in scroll down. There we go. And we don't want position absolute for that. We want to add layout to this. There we go. And then we also want to increase the size of this type. So I'll just come down here, increase that size, and maybe we'll make it bold for the fun of it. Okay, so there's our scroll position. Next up, let's go back to Figma, and we are going to, let's see here. We're going to grab, now there was, when I was preparing this project, which is what I do, I created already in Framer before creating just to make sure there's no hiccups. Notice that we have a frame. I'm going to ungroup this because it did not properly import when I went to do it. So what it is, it's just two different separate layers right now. These are not grouped. They're not even in auto layout. When I was adding this in auto layout, which is what I normally would do, it was not properly importing into Framer. So let me just show you. If I go ahead to plugins and go here, we'll go back to Framer. I'm just going to paste that right there. If we go back to layers, you can see how it says frame 5, and we could scale it up and down and it works, but we don't really have access at this point in time to the individual layers inside of it, unless we double click right here physically and we get access to frame 5 in the stack here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go ahead and grab our frame 5 right here, and I'm going to come out back to Figma, ungroup those, and then just take those separately. We'll copy the element with our plugin. And then now what I can do is we could take the ellipse and we have our little Instagram logo and we could put that right inside of it, but we can choose this and add a layout. As soon as we add layout, it centers it automatically, and now it's working as we want it to. So sometimes little quirks like that may occur. Right here is about a good size, I would say. Now, another thing, we want to make this a component because it's a repeating pattern, right? So this is they're all the same, except obviously we have different icons in the middle. So if we're going to create a component with component variants, which we would need for each of these 4 elements, then we need to also right-click and use our Figma to HTML plugin, and we will go back to our browser here, and notice where you just make sure you have the ellipse 1 selected. I'm going to rename this. We'll just call this social media container, and I'm going to paste. So now we have 2 of them. But here's the thing, we're just going to hide this one. So right click and hide it. There, now we have access to it when we go to create this component. So we'll go back, we'll do the same thing real quick with this one. All right, let's go ahead and hide that. And then finally, we'll do it one more time. And we will copy that. Okay, great. So we'll go back, paste, hide, good to go. Now at this point is when we can go ahead and take this whole thing, social media container, right click, create component. All right, so now we have our very first one called variant 1. We'll call this one IG for Instagram. And before we create the variants, I want to create a hover state for this one. So we're going to create hover. And what is it that we want to change when this is hovered? Well, we can rotate this. I think that might be cool. Yeah, let's rotate it that way. So if I hold shift, we'll just rotate it 15 degrees. You can see it gives you kind of like a quick access point. So every 15 degrees. So I think you don't want to rotate it too much. I think 15 degrees is good, and that's what we'll do with the rest of them. You can even maybe make it a little bit smaller, or you can make it a little bit bigger. Up to you. Okay, so if we go look at this and hit play, there we go. Not too much is happening. It's not all that exciting of an interaction, but just hang on. It's going to get a lot funner. So I'm going to double click this. We're going to create another variant, and we're another one, and then another one. Alrighty. So now what we do is we hide this one. So hide, and then we're going to show LinkedIn. Right click and show. We'll add our variant, hover, rather. It's not a variant, it's just a hover. And what we could do with this one, same thing. Shift, so we're at 15 degrees. I increased that size. If this is 60 and 59, I just slightly. Okay. We'll do the same thing with this one. Hover, hold shift, we're at 15. Slightly increase it. Oh, oopsie. I did the wrong one. Let me delete that. There we go. Okay. So we need to hide. I forgot to hide the original Instagram one. So let's just go ahead and hide this one. And then we're going to show X. So we'll show that. There we go. So now we can add the hover. Make it slightly larger. This one will hide this. And then we'll show TikTok. Show. And add a hover. There we go. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is rename these variants. So this is LinkedIn. This one will be TikTok. I'm just double clicking to change that. Variant 5 will be X. Great. So now let's wrap a stack around this because we're going to have 4 of them side by side. So all you have to do is right click over here and add stack. Select our original component, duplicate it, Control D, Control D, Control D. We don't see it because the parent element should be changed to fit content. Look at that. Give ourselves a little bit of space. And then now we can go ahead and start changing these variants. So we come over here, we change this to LinkedIn. Sorry, but my phone needs to be silenced. And there we go. So now if we go ahead and hit play, look at that. We're just getting started, folks. It's not that exciting just yet. Okay. So we have this simple, hover stuff. I really haven't shown you anything that you don't already know about, for the most part. But what I want to do is wrap all this element inside of another frame so that we can get it centered in its own container area. So I'm just going to hit F, wrap it around, maybe somewhere right around this tall, and then add a layout, and that way we'll get it centered up. Let's hide this. Okay. So now we have this stack right here, and I guess we can just call this an overall section called social media. Okay, and then we'll just call this social stack. Okay. So now let's work on the part where when we scroll down, we get each one of these 4 icons to kind of fall into place. And we'll start here with the first one. And what's really cool is we can just copy all the work we do and paste it onto these. And that way we don't have to do and set this up from scratch for each one. So the first thing we're going to do is I want to define what's called a scroll section. So for instance, if I come down, you'll see scroll section. And if you click on the little info icon, you can watch a video to specifically show you how to smoothly scroll to a specific section within your page. That's not the only reason you might want to have a scroll section though. And you'll see why in a bit. But first, let's just get this created. And I'm going to give this a section name of social. All right. So nothing changes, but just understand when you add that, you'll see this little icon. It is a scroll section and it's called social. Okay. Just remember that. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to take a social stack, and because I want these to come from up here and I want people to be able to see them outside of this stack, we have to make sure that overflow is visible on the parent container. Now, here's where the fun stuff starts to happen. We're going to go ahead and select our first social media icon, and this one we're going to click on effects. All right. Now, you might be wondering, which one do I choose here? Now we're going to experiment obviously with all these, but scroll, we have a lot of options here. So scroll animation, we're going to click that. And when we have that selected, we want to target, specifically speaking, the section in view. So the section means we have to specify the one that we created. If you didn't create that, this won't show up. It'll just say choose. So what this is basically saying is when this section is in view, meaning when the person scrolls down, then, and we call this the viewport, when it's view in the viewport, which is what this property is, then I want you to animate this element. Now, it gives you 3 different positions in which you can start to animate elements that are found, within or when this section becomes in view. It's basically when the top of this section, in this case right here, reaches the bottom of the viewport, like when you're scrolling, or it's when it reaches the center or opposite at the bottom. So where the bottom meets the top of the viewport, if that makes sense. I'm just going to leave it here in the center. And you could also choose to have replay on or off, and you'll see what that means. And then you have presets here, and this one by default is just on fade in. So if I hit play, notice how when we scrolled right to the middle of the section, it just shows up. And replay means it's going to keep on doing it every time. If you don't want that, we just say no for replay. It'll only happen once. See? Very powerful. This is stuff you create if you know a little bit about coding with Greenstock Animation Platform in their scroll trigger plugin. But this, which is great, we have a UI, we don't have to write code. So we're going to say yes on replay though. And we can see we have the presets. If one of the presets works for what you want, like flip vertical, like what does that look like? Okay, that's what that looks like. That's pretty cool. Then you don't have to do any more. However, if you want to customize them, then you can. So let's slide in top. That kind of sounds like what we want, right? Oh, that actually is pretty close to what we want. So that's interesting. Well, let's go ahead and say, okay, well, let's fine tune this more. So let's click on enter, and we can see it's already taken the opacity to zero. I'm going to leave it at 1. And then my Y offset, I want it to come from up here, from the top. So if I increase this value, maybe I just type in 399. There we go. And we go all the way to where it's just hidden. There we go. Now watch what happens when we come down. Oh, look at that. And it has this cool kind of like spring animation. You notice how like it comes down, it's like, yeah, I like that. But I want to accentuate that a little bit more, or emphasize that. So if we click on spring, you can kind of increase this the damping effect. There we go. Just play around with them, have fun. Watch this. Oh, isn't that cool? Whoop. And our hover effects still work. Okay, so let's say also we want this whole thing to scale down slightly when we hover over it. So you can have a hover within the component like we did here, but you can also bake in a hover right here as well. So we can add effects, hover, and over here, it's already grown it for us, but we want to go the opposite direction, like 0.9 or maybe 0.8. Opacity will stay the same. Everything else will stay the same. And let's just see what this looks like now. So we're going to scroll down. That is so cool. All right, now these ones don't have that yet because we haven't applied that hover animation. Okay, now the final thing, before we do the sequence animation on each one of these and we replicate things and we adjust the delay, is to add a custom cursor, which I don't think we've tackled just yet, but it's super easy. Let's say, for instance, when somebody hovers over these, you want a little pop-up that follows the cursor that shows the person's handle on each respective social media network. How would you do that? All right, here's how. So I'm just going to take a type tool, hit T. I'm just going to click anywhere here, and I'm going to type in @DesignCourse Comm. And that might be my Instagram handle. I'm not big on Instagram, whatever. So I'm also going to make this, just for now, absolute, because I just want to position it here, roughly around where it's going to be, you know, around here, whatever. And I'm going to make this a lot smaller. Like, we're going to go real small, like size 12. Okay. Then I'm going to hit, I want this to be wrapped around a white pill-shaped container, or it'll be inside of a white pill-shaped container, because no one's going to be able to see this if you're hovering over here on these black icons. So this is just for readability. So hit F, drag a circle around it, or a rectangle rather, and I'm going to take this and just make it a pill shape. We're going to make it white. Okay, and then we're going to take frame, and we're going to add a layout. Great. And so now if we type, oh, notice how it's not changing shape. We want to change this to fit content, and then add a little bit of padding as well. So if we add padding, there we go. That looks pretty good. So now when I start typing, there we go. Then what we do, the next step when you want to have a custom cursor like this, because this is going to follow the cursor around. It's not really a custom cursor, it's just following the default cursor. You could replace the cursor entirely with this, and I'll show you how to do it. I wouldn't do that though, and I'll tell you why. But anyways, let's say we have this, we're ready to go, we're going to make a component out of it. Well, actually, let's say we're not ready, because I understand that I want to have this animate when it shows up. And it's going to kind of like animate into place. There's a way to do it manually, and then a much better way. I was going to show you the manual way, but I'm going to hold off on that, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. So first, we're going to right-click and create component, and we'll just call this social tag. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to create not a variant. You would think you might have to make this animate up from nowhere, but really if we just grab the text, we could see that we have effects in here. And on up here, which is what we want to happen when it appears, this white tag appears, and it only appears when somebody hovers over one of those black elements, or those icons. So what we could do is we just have up here fade in. How about slide in bottom or slide in top? Well, let's see. If we just hit play and reload it, you could see it's basically doing exactly what I want. This is what I want. So now it has animation just by adding a little appear effect. All right. So now what we do is we can just delete this. Don't worry, it's still in our assets right here. So what we can do is we select this, and then we come over to cursor. We click plus, and we're going to choose custom cursor. So what's cool is like there's a bunch of cursors you can select here that you can quickly just change the cursor to. We're not going to do that one. So let's just delete that, and let's add a custom component cursor. We're going to select our social tag, and notice, remember I mentioned you can either make it replace this cursor that you see here moving on the top of your screen, or follow it. We're going to follow it. And what's cool is when you change this to follow, you can change the offset in terms of the X and Y value of where that little tag is going to show up in relation to the cursor that's hovered over these elements. Okay, so I know it's probably going to need to go down further, but you can experiment, with this yourself. So let's just go ahead and see what happens, because we've just added that on the first element. Look at that. I don't know about you, but I think that's very cool. Sometimes if you get hovered right on the edge, that might be an issue, but most people, they're just hovering over. I love that. Okay, so we have that now. And now what we can do is, oh, and by the way, let me show you when we change this to replace what that actually does. So if we come down here, it's just going to replace the cursor. It kind of feels weird. I mean, I suppose you could do that if you wanted to, but me personally, I would keep the default cursor and just do a follow. Now, if you want to replace the cursor with just a little dot, that's one thing, but I wouldn't have it like be text and stuff like we had shown. So this is going to be a follow, and I like the offset and all this stuff. You can actually add a transition right here, and it's just going to be a spring-based transition. So we see what that actually does. So it really doesn't seem to do much of anything. It kind of, okay, so it actually does. So if you hover over this, notice how like it slowly kind of, it takes a while to catch up and then it slows down. That's what that does. So if I go back to hover and we take this and, oh, interesting. Okay, let me make sure I'm sorry, I was on the wrong element. The cursor, and you take that off, you'll see it's very quick. It follows every single movement. If you want to have that nice flowing, smooth sort of animation, add the spring animation. So look at that. Oh, it's so nice. Okay, so now guess what? We're going to take our effects here, and like our hover effect, for instance, And I'm going to add that onto each one of these. So we go to Effects, right click, and paste. All right, so now they have that effect, but only this one has that. Okay, so next up, we're going to go back here. We also have the scroll animation. So we're going to right click and copy that. I'm going to select these, right click up here and hit paste. Now, what's going to happen is they're not going to be a stagger sequence animation. They're all going to come in at the same time. I don't like that, but let's hit play anyhow. Oh no, it did not work. Now, in this case, let's see what's happening here. So if we click on animation, oh, that's right. I forgot about this little issue. Whenever you paste these, for some reason, at the time of recordings, they may fix this. This section does not get transferred. So let's just choose social for all three of those. Now they all fall in. Okay, so now we just need to create a delay offset basically for each one of these. So if I click on scroll, we go to enter and transition, we can add a 0.1 second delay. Right here, if you click the second one, fortunately it keeps the same panel open. We'll create a 0.2 second delay, and then we'll create a 0.3 second delay there. Now watch this. Is that not cool? Okay, we're just about done. And let me show you another thing. If we take this whole section up here, take this whole section, copy it, select up here, paste it, it'll go at the bottom. We can double click this and change this to scroll up. Is when we hit play, we scroll down, we see them all. When you scroll back up, guess what? It does the same thing, it replays it. So it's very cool, very powerful effect. Very nice and snazzy. So now, there's another issue though. When we want to do the custom cursor, the web cursor, so we'll just right click and copy this, take these three, we will take the cursor, right click and paste on it. We should have cursors here for all of them. Yay. But what if on LinkedIn my handle is different than over here on Instagram? How do you fix that? How do we customize that text? I'm going to show you how. Well, we simply go back and we go to our assets, we click on social tag, and we simply add a variant for each one. I'm not going to add all 4 variants because this is fictional, but I'll just show you one other variant and then you'll figure out how to do the rest. So let's say for LinkedIn or whatever, it might be DC Comm. I don't know, DC Comm or something like that. All right, so and then we'll rename our variant so that we know which one we're adjusting. Go to layers. Variant 2, we'll just call this LinkedIn. And then this variant, what was the first one? IG, I think. Okay, so now if we go over here, when there's a variant attached to this component, you'll see if we click on social tag for our cursor, we can choose LinkedIn. So we hit play. There's DC Comm, and then here's DesignCourse Comm. Look how powerful that is. That's so awesome. Okay, so now that we have this ready, one final thing that we needed to do based on our Figma project file is this big thing in the background, which this is simple. We're just going to create a very simple loop animation where it just slowly rotates. So let's start it off like in this rotation. Right click. We're going to copy this. We're going to go back. We'll just select the overall container here, and we're going to make this absolute. We're going to change the Z index to 0, but also position it above our social stack. Here we go. Okay. So this is looking pretty good. Maybe I'll make it smaller slightly. And then now what I want to do is we're going to create a let's see here. Oh, so sometimes you might not have the option to create like an effect. If that's the case, like in the case of this graphic, we just right click and you choose add frame. So the frame itself is still absolute, and so is the element inside of it, so it'll work. So we click on the frame, guess what? Now we have access to our effects. So we can just do a loop because I just want this always rotating. And it already has it rotating. And if I hit play, it's way too fast. That's going to make you, it's going to make people vomit. So what we really want to do is click on this loop effect, and we want to adjust under transition. That's where we have access to the length, the time, how long it takes for it to do one full rotation. Let's do 35 seconds. I know that sounds crazy, but you want this to be very minimal movement. Look at that. And that's just perfect in my opinion. And look how cool this interaction is. It's just so nice and smooth. It may not be smooth on the video here because of the frame rate, but when I'm playing this on my computer, it's as fast as it can be. And it's just such a fun joy to use a UI like this. It's just so fun. So hopefully you're starting to see the power of Framer, especially in relation to interactivity and animation. But we're still only scratching the surface. We have a lot more to learn. Let's continue on.
Now, did you enjoy that? I know I did. So if you want to learn more about Framer, you could take my upcoming course from Figma to Framer right now, and you could take it for a discounted price because it's currently in development. It should be finished in about a month or two. And yeah, let's start learning Framer. Check out the link. See you soon. Bye.